Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast series. Our show is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app, which allows innkeepers to provide guests with their recommendations of the best local places to eat, play, and shop during their stay. The Frictionless Guest app is accessible through all mobile and desktop devices, and you can learn more about it by visiting frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. I'm Matt Langen, and I'll be joined by Steve Short, the founder and CEO of the Frictionless Guest app. And our guest for this episode is a little bit different than our usual guest. Today, we're speaking with Tim Piper, a renowned B&B industry expert and consultant who is with the Hearthside Group. He is also the host of the Aspiring Innkeeper seminar series, and he's located in Waitsfield, Vermont, and the Hearthside Group has an office in New Hampshire. Tim will be sharing more about his background, the services he offers for B&B buyers and sellers, as well as his insights into the B&B sector overall. And Tim and Steve, how you both doing today?
Great, Matt.
Excellent.
Everything's beautiful
Doing well, Matt.
here in Vermont.
That's great. Well, I'm happy to hear that. Well, Tim, let's start at the top, if you don't mind. I know you have quite a deep experience in the B&B arena. Would love to hear more about your background.
Well, Matt, I've been in the hospitality business for over 45 years, and I've worked in everything from seaside resorts to ski and golf resorts, conference resorts, and I was also a partner for 11 years in a bed and breakfast up here actually in Waitsfield, Vermont, called the Inn at the Round Barn Farm. So I bring a lot of experiences, not only in those types of properties, but in working with different markets like tennis and golf and conference, wedding markets, etc.
That's great. If you don't mind, tell us about the Hearthside Group and the services that you provide for both B&B buyers and sellers.
Well, Hearthside Group, we've been around. Gary Gosselin, Wendy Beach founded the Hearthside Group back in the early 90s, and I joined them a little over a year and a half ago. And what's really interesting about the Hearthside Group is that we do have brokerage services, which is nice. What I really like about our group is that every single one of us, all three of us, actually have hospitality experience. Gary had owned a B&B for a period of time. Wendy and her family currently still run the Basin Harbor Resort in Vermont as well. So what we bring to the table beyond any kind of realty type thing is actually honest to goodness, hard knocks experience from the hospitality business. And between the three of us, we have over 115 years of hospitality experience that we bring to the table.
That's great. Steve, anything to add on that one?
So I guess we'll get into this, but maybe a lot more detail. Talk about consulting versus brokering and where you really kind of fall into that mix, I guess, and give us a feel for, I'm maybe an aspiring B&B, innkeeper, and I'm thinking of buying an existing B&B. And do I go to a broker? Do I go to a Hearthside Group? What are the advantages of working with a group like yours? And how is it different than just a pure brokerage, let's say?
Well, Steve, first of all, innkeeping, B&Bs and innkeeping is a very unique business. What's unique about it is, unlike any other commercial business that you would buy, it is so intertwined with your lifestyle in your actual day-to-day living. And why that's important to understand is any other business you buy, you work maybe 15, 20 hours a week and you go home and whatever to your place where you live. Whereas in a B&B or an inn, oftentimes your business is where you live. And so when you talk about the consulting aspect beyond just the real estate, it is an entire lifestyle commitment that somebody or a couple makes into this business. And we've seen tremendous success and tremendous failures when people go into the B&B business or the inn business. And oftentimes it's not about the business acumen. It's about the lifestyle and how they have the ability to handle it or not handle it, and that enriches their lives or creates challenges in their lives. So we know that. We've all lived it. Wendy, Gary, myself, we've all lived that above and beyond the numbers. And so people will oftentimes invest their life fortunes into something like this. And as they go into it blind, they would say things such as like, oh my God, I had no idea that, what this business is truly all about. And they're either excited or they're saying this isn't for me. So when we do our Aspiring Innkeeping seminars, what we're doing is we're not there to scare people, but we take rose-colored glasses off of people and we say, look, guys, this is a business, okay? And this is a commitment to a lifestyle. It can be exciting. It can be absolutely one of the coolest things you've ever done with your life. But there are challenges. And what we do is we take the rose-colored glasses off to show them what those challenges would be. And oftentimes, as we find in our seminars, some people will come up to us at the end of the first few hours and they go, wow, I had no idea how much this was involved. This isn't for us. And we say, that's okay. That's a success. And we would rather you find that out in an Aspiring Innkeeping seminar that's a day and a half old than to have you invest all your life savings, move halfway across the country, get into it for 6 months, and then figure out maybe this isn't for us. So we pride ourselves that in an Aspiring Innkeeping seminar, we say you have two goals. One is to find out if it's for you or not. And if it's not, that's a success. And secondly, if it is for you, let us help you to build the model that's going to work best for you based on the physical aspects of the business and matching it to the buyer profile and the skill sets you have so that we can maximize the opportunities and the success for you.
So I guess the way I'd maybe summarize that is sometimes buyers go in and they, like you say, they've got the rose-colored glasses, or they've got some, in their mind, there's some idea of what it means, you know, when I buy this B&B. And so there's definitely that aspect of it. But if they're focused more on just kind of the physical or the real estate part of it, like, wow, this is a great place, you know, and they don't really consider the human aspects of that place or what the business will be in that place, what life's going to be like, then that to me is more of a real estate transaction, even though there's business involved and financials and all that. What you're saying is, I believe, is that we've got a human aspect of it that's equally, if not more important, that people don't consider, and that someone, a consultant like you, brings to the table that like a pure real estate broker would not, I guess. Is that right?
Well, I think here's the thing. We've lived it, okay? And I look at it as a three-legged stool to be successful. There is the real estate portion, so you have to have a knowledge somewhat of the real estate. There's no doubt about that. There's the business portion. That's the cash flow. That's the engine that drives this buggy, if you will. But then the third element on that third leg of that stool is the lifestyle that goes with that. And with that lifestyle, or that what I'll call the buyer profile, it's not only the lifestyle, but it's the skill sets they bring to the table that will help to maximize that opportunity. And if you do not look at all three of those legs of the stool, and you only look at one of them, or you look at two of them, what happens to the stool is that you have the opportunity where that stool can fall over. So yes, people can talk real estate all they want, but if they talk the real estate and they don't have the business piece behind it, and they don't have what's it like to be an innkeeper behind it as well, it doesn't mean they can't be successful. It just means that you're not bringing all of the forces and tools to bear to make a decision that would minimize risks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess I was sort of skirting around those three concepts and you put it succinctly. So that makes sense.
Okay.
So what is it like if I'm a buyer? What is the process? So, you know, I've got this option of just going out and doing it on my own, but somehow I get wind of, you know, wow, there's a Tim Piper out there. Maybe I'm going to talk with him, and we get together and we talk. And what happens in terms of the process, the buying process, once I engage with you?
You know, basically what we pride ourselves in is that we say we can be there for the entire life cycle for you in the innkeeping career. So when I get a buyer that calls me and says, hey, I'm thinking of buying an inn, et cetera, I ask a couple of basic questions. And basically what it is, Steve, I'm saying, where are you in this life cycle? And who are the players that are going to be involved in this? Are you potentially a single innkeeper? Are you an innkeeper who is going to bring a partner to the table? Is that partner as fully committed to this as you? Or is this your dream and the partner is just coming along for the ride? These are really important questions, because in trying to understand where they are with this, how long have you been looking? Where have you been looking? What haven't you liked? And what I'm trying to establish is, where are they in this process, and have they developed the skills and been given the tools to make a successful decision? Oftentimes I'll hear, oh, well, we always go to a B&B and we go to an inn for a getaway weekend and we just think it's really great. We're sitting there having coffee in the morning saying, honey, let's quit our Monday to Friday 9 to 5 rat race and go up in an inn. Isn't it beautiful up here? That could be a recipe for disaster, because what they don't realize is that the innkeeper was up at 6:30 in order to get their breakfast prepared for 8 or 230. And they need to understand all those pieces that go with it. And so as we go through this process, I'm trying to understand the buyer profile. Now, if I suspect that the buyers are still in the dream aspect, that's when I suggest, hey, maybe you should be going to one of our Aspiring Innkeeping seminars. And what that does is it's a 1.5-day seminar, but what it does is it allows for people to really get immersed into what would you really be getting into here? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? And as again, we cover things such as how to finance, how to work with your partner, day in the life of an innkeeper. What are the margins of each of the different profit centers so that when you build your model to be successful financially, are you building your model towards the right profit centers? Where's the location? What are the pluses and minuses of the location that you would choose? And what would be the markets based on those locations? And therefore, are these markets you're comfortable with or not comfortable with? So there's a lot of these questions that oftentimes when they get done with our 1.5-day seminar, they're overwhelmed on how little they knew. And they all say, whether they ever use it again or not, they all say this was a really good investment of our time and money to really get us on the right track.
That's great.
That's pretty cool.
Yes. Sorry, Steve, I was going to take the natural progression here because when we spoke earlier, a couple weeks ago before this, you went kind of deep on the processes for the sellers on the flip side of the coin with valuation services and all that kind of good stuff. Would love to hear more about that.
Sure. What we do is, whether it's a buyer or a seller, Matt, there's fundamental questions that have to be answered. And again, in the last week, I've had a couple of sellers call me and said, hey, I'm thinking of selling my inn. I need to understand how much my business is worth because I really don't understand. And I've had 2 or 3 buyers that have called me in the last week and have said, I'm interested in buying an inn. Could you tell me how much this is worth before I put an offer on this property, on this inn? Well, what we do is we do a valuation setup. And basically, whether you're the buyer or the seller, the process is the same, which is whoever hires me, basically, I get the financials of the existing business for the last 3 years. I understand what their occupancy is. I understand their financials and where they spend their monies and if they're making money or not and how much. And I go through all of that first, and I'm establishing a trend with that. The second piece of that is I go and I physically go look at the property. I'm paid to go to that property, to look at the rooms, the FF&E, the exterior structure, the location of where it is in relation to a destination and how strong is that destination with the tourist bureau or the chamber of commerce or whatever. And I look oftentimes at the competition in that area. I read the TripAdvisor reviews. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to understand where is this business and what is the value of this business. And I incorporate real estate and physical asset and condition. In addition, I overlay with the cash flow, and then I look at the markets and I see how they're doing, et cetera. Then I'll always sit with the sellers, no matter whether it's the buyer or the seller. I will sit with the sellers and I will go over their marketing, their operations, their competition, their staffing to try and get a sense of how the business is being run and where the opportunities are. Then I take all that information, I come back and I do 3 things. I write a report, but this report covers 3 things. 1, you come up with, through a valuation process of looking at it from a 3D model, if you will, of different forms of how to establish value. Some will be, revenue. Some will be cash flow coverage of debt service. Some will be physical asset as an inn. Some will be physical asset as an inn in conjunction with the cash flow to support the asset. All of these, income multiples, there's 5 or 6 valuation methods that are used to come in to understand what this business is all about. From that, I establish a price and I say, this is what I think this business is worth, whether it's the buyer or the seller, whoever hired me. Secondly, I say, here's the buyer profile based on this business model and based on where the opportunities are that could probably best fit and make the most successful gains with this business. And number 3, I usually come up with, based upon my experiences, some low-hanging fruit that, again, whoever hired me, I could say, by the way, while I was there, I noticed you don't do this, or you do this, or you don't charge enough here, or you're charging too much here, or whatever, to allow that person, whoever had hired me, to say, here's opportunities where you can improve that business relatively quickly without a lot of costs. So those valuation method, that process is the same, whether it's the buyer that hires me or the seller that hires me. Now, if it's the seller that hires me, I take that and I said, this is what we believe this is worth. And they might agree with me and they might not. oftentimes if they don't agree with me, it's because they put too much emotion in the value. They say, Tim, you don't understand. I get up at 6 a.m. This is all you think it's worth? I have to make eggs at 6:30 and blah, blah, blah. I said, been there and done that. And I said, but guess what? That doesn't add value to it. That's your emotion talking. And so we decide whether to agree on a price or not. And if we do, then we can say, okay, we can help you to put this out to market. If it's the buyer's side, then the buyer says, okay, this is what you think it's worth. And I say, yes, this is what I think it's worth. Well, and we're going to hire you and go through this process. And then I would help them negotiate the sale with the seller, go through the process, help them to get, assuming that they come to an agreement, then I will help them with the financing, help them put a business financial plan together to give to the banks. I will call the banks on their behalf, and I will negotiate with the banks to try and come up with the best deal for the buyer. And I do this knowing if we don't get financing, the sale does not get done. And so the bank's biggest concerns always are, will you have enough money to pay my mortgage? And that's the first concern. The second concern is usually the people that are buying do not have hospitality experience or innkeeping experience, and that I, as a bank, I look at that as a risk. So for me to come forward as a buyer representative, what I say to the banker is they're not alone. I said I would be with them for 1 year after they buy the place to be a consultant, that I'm a phone call away. And they said they'll have that 45 years of hospitality experience right next to them for the next year to help them get started, which helps the bank to alleviate the concern and the risk that they might have in that transaction. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Steve, any follow-on commentary or questions?
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing that, at least as a kind of an outsider, not having managed a B&B or an inn or whatever, it's pretty amazing. It probably seems like it's second hand to you. It's not a big deal, but it's the detail that it takes. There are so many details that go into this. And, when I think of it, it's so specialized. It seems to me that, hey, if I was considering buying a B&B, an inn, whatever, that this would be the thing to do. I mean, you got to go to somebody who's going to be on your side, there for you. First off, to make sure that, like, from the evaluation process, that you're not paying too much, but, more importantly, someone who's going to guide you through not just the sale, but here's what you're going to need to do, once you get up and running or you take this business over. So once you've gotten through the boot camp of the Aspiring Innkeeper seminar or whatever interaction with you to learn, okay, is this for me? And you've decided, yes, it is. There's still all of this that you need to go through for the sale and then running the business. So anyway, I guess it's more of a comment that it seems that it just wouldn't be smart for people not to hire a consultant like you to do this. When we had talked to you initially, what was the number? I think I'd asked, because I had this my first impression. What's the percentage of people who buy B&Bs? What's the percentage that actually use consultants like you for that sale, for that purchase?
That's a great question, and I will say that I don't know the answer for that. I will say, and if I had to guess, I would say maybe 85% do not use a consultant or somebody of that ilk. And that is changing rapidly as more and more people come into the market. Again, and this is maybe for some of you, it's too old now, but back in the days of the Bob Newhart show, 15, 20 years ago, you'd have couples coming in and say, I want to run an inn. I saw the Bob Newhart show. And there was a picture of a guy, Bob Newhart, sitting on a couch on a cardigan sweater, never got off the couch, and he's quote unquote running his inn. And so they go, yeah, I love that kind of lifestyle. That's great. And the reality is obviously totally different than that. But the buyers back then just kind of came in and said, okay, this is great. And so there was a lot of emotion with that. I'm tired with my job. I want to leave the city. This looks like a beautiful spot. I love the front porch. So let's buy it. Oh, they're asking $4 million. Okay, that's okay. But, here's the front porch. And I really love the front porch, honey. Let's buy this place. So in that process, there was a lot of emotions that were put in. There was a lot of ignorance and understanding that, number one, it's a business. Number two, it's a lifestyle for that business. And you need to understand those in that priority in order to be successful. Now, it doesn't mean that people weren't successful back then, but they had a lot of hard knocks going through that process until they started to figure that out. Nowadays, people are coming in, They're looking for aspiring innkeeping. They're learning so much when they go through these things that, and it's fun to watch. You see the two of them looking at each other like, oh my God, we never even thought about this. And as they go through this day and a half of discovery, they're not only discovering a lot about the inn business and what they'd be interested in, they are discovering an awful lot about themselves and whether they have the ilk to move forward or not. And oftentimes this can be, emotionally draining for people, but that's okay, because we wanted to have them do it now, not after they've sunk their life savings into it 6 months into the business. And everybody is appreciative of that knowledge and that opportunity of discovery, self-discovery through that process. As a result, they come away with better tools. They come away more focused. They come away better prepared to buy the right property for their success for themselves, because they now know not only what they need to do, they understand what the banks are looking for. They understand where value is and where value isn't when they go and buy a potential business.
So now when you work with, let's say, a buyer, what does the buyer pay? You're a consultant, broker, whatever it is that you're, whatever services you're going to provide. What can they expect to pay? I mean, so there's value in having you, almost invaluable to have your experience behind this. But if I'm a buyer, and I say, Tim, I want to work with you, what can I expect to have to pay?
Well, it depends upon where they are in that. There's usually two types of buyers that will call. One buyer will call and say, Tim, there's an inn, a very specific inn. This is what I'm looking for. I want you to go tell me what this inn is worth before I put an offer on this inn. It's XYZ Inn. It's located in this place, and that's the only inn I'm looking for. For that type of a buyer, we have a buyer agreement, and I said, okay, I'm going to have to do a valuation on that inn. And if you want me to do this, I will be happy to, lay it out and just do that one short-term thing. That's a set fee to get a valuation report done, et cetera, which I charge $3,500 plus expenses to get there. And so with that, I would do everything I told you and explain to you in the valuation process, the financials, going there, talking to the owners, looking at the destination, et cetera. And what I'm trying to establish is, and I always do this, at the end of the valuation, I said, if I, with my 45 years of experience, if I bought this tomorrow, how would I run this going forward to maximize my investment? That's what I do. And so in putting all this together, I go to that buyer and I said, this is what it's worth. And they say, well, but they're asking X. And I said, well, I don't think that you should pay that. Or they might be asking X. I find out that it's worth more than what they're asking. And they said, you're telling me it's worth more than what they're asking? And I said, yes, not always, but sometimes that happens. And they go, well, why are they doing that? I said, because they don't understand their own business. And so with that one-on-one, I would work with them, help negotiate, go through the process. And for that, we ask, it's a 3% of the sale price is the final piece that they would owe. And of that 3%, oftentimes we would get percentage of that, usually 2 or 3% of that from the other broker. So they're responsible for the 3%, but they don't necessarily pay for the 3%. And with that goes 1 year of consulting by phone to get them started for that first year going forward.
Okay.
The second buyer, I just got one. The second buyer calls and said, Tim, I'm interested in an inn somewhere in this area, but I don't know which inn. Okay. Could you help me? Well, the first thing I would do, which is the process I'm going to do with her, is sit her down and say, well, tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where are you? What do you want to do? Tell me what your model would be like. Is there anybody else coming to the party, et cetera? And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to establish and flush out the buyer profile that would be in front of me before I go looking at all types of different inns. Because basically what I'm trying to do for her is to say, look, you might be interested in this area that might have, say, 35 inns. But until I understand who you are, I'm not going to go call those 35 inns. I'm going to find out who you are and what would best fit for you. And once I understand that model, then of those 35 inns, there might be 5 inns or 6 inns that fit that model, and those are the ones I will focus on. By us doing that process, we save the buyer time, money, frustration, all the way down the line. I've had buyers that have called me and they've been looking for 2 or 3 years for inns, and they're very frustrated. But it was clear to me that they hadn't decided who they wanted to be as a buyer profile. They had not put their skill sets together. They had not focused on building their own model. So therefore, any model would do for them and no model would do for them. And it was very frustrating for them.
Mm-hmm.
I use the analogy on this as, let's say if you and your partner said, honey, let's go buy a vehicle. And so you jump in your car and off you go looking for vehicles. But what haven't you done? You haven't established what type of a model do you want? Do you want an SUV, a pickup truck, a minivan? Do you want a two-seater sports car? You haven't decided that. So what are you doing? You're looking at everything. But what we do with the Aspiring Innkeeping is we turn around and we say, let's define the model that'll work for you. And we find out it's the two-seater sports car. Now you go out and you test drive two-seater sports cars, you see. And it's just saved you a wealth of time and money and frustration.
And also part of the value that you add to the whole process, if somebody's searching and let's say geography might not be that important to them. You told us a great story before. The fact that you're in this business full time and you interact with other consultants, it's kind of a smaller, networked group, I guess. You're aware of properties all over the place. And you told a great story before. Maybe you can tell us here on the podcast. To me, it kind of epitomizes the need to have someone like you involved, or at least the value that you bring to the table, where, what was it? Somebody was looking for a certain place and you said, no, that's not the place you want. I have the right place for you, or something. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was interesting because, part of what we do with Hearthside is that, we go to national innkeeping. We speak at national innkeeping shows. We have our exhibit booth there, that type of thing. So it allows for us the opportunity to constantly find a flow of buyers and sellers on a national scale basis. I just came back from one in Las Vegas, the PI conference in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. And, we'll be heading to the one in Cincinnati for AIHP's conference. And what this does is this brings innkeepers from all over the country to these places, and it brings aspiring innkeepers from all over the country to these places. And so the fact that we were out and about like we are, we found, a couple that was somehow had contacted us and said, hey, I'm interested in, and we're looking at up in the mountains, and we happen to be up in Montana, and we kind of saw this place. We're not sure, blah, blah, blah. We said, well, where are you from? And they were in the St. Louis area. And I said, we're going to go to this next conference down near St. Louis. Let's get together and meet. And I said, I really don't know you. So met with them. And from that, we were able to define a specific model based on who these two people were. And all of a sudden this picture comes into mind. And what came into mind was this other property that was in Colorado of a person that called me out of the clear blue and said, hey, we're thinking of selling, and this is what our property is all about. I hadn't even met them. And all of a sudden I said to this couple, I said, you know what? I found your property, and I said, the model, the matching of this, I said, I think I have the property for you. And so here it is, the couple from St. Louis who were looking in Montana, and yet because I knew of this other one in Colorado, make a long story short, they got together, both sight unseen, but they got together because of what I was able to match between the buyer profiles and what their wants were, and this specific property that I thought matched really, really well with them. They would have never found it without me on that basis. And I think that's where, yes, we have other, consultants and things throughout the country, and we talk to each other all the time, so it's not like we don't have other resources out there.
Yeah, you're kind of the hub of the various spokes that are out there, all these different places and things going on. Okay,
right.
Cool. Let's jump to, I guess, to try to wrap things up. Talk about, if you would, what you see as kind of where things are going currently with buyers, people who are looking for, to buy a B&B. What's kind of the demographic? How are those buyers looking these days? What's the profile for them?
Well, as you probably remember, I'm the president of the Vermont Inn and Bed and Breakfast Association as well. And so I'm involved on an ongoing basis with whatever the trends are as far as running the Inn and B&B, but I'm also involved with not only the buyers that I bring to the table all over the country, but who's coming and buying back into these Vermont properties. And there's a couple trends that have changed over the years. 15 years ago, if the buyers were usually couples, 15 years ago, the inn had to generate enough income to satisfy both incomes for the two people. And as a result of that, they were much bigger inns because they had to develop the cash flow in order to satisfy both of their salaries. With the advent of the internet, I'm going to say about 15, 20 years ago now, what's happened has been now there's a new model, a new couple, for example, where one of them has the dream and the other one will turn around and say, okay, honey, I will support your dream. I'm not necessarily going to be a full-time innkeeper, but because of the internet, I can keep my job as a consultant or as a writer or, investment person or whatever it might be, and work from the inn, still doing my piece while you live your part of the dream, and I will support you. What that did is opened up a whole nother batch of inns where cash flow didn't have to cover both parties anymore. And from a financing a bank's perspective, they're saying, okay, wow, yeah, this is good. As long as this person is keeping their job and their income, then this inn, even though the cash flow doesn't cover the whole thing, the combination of the two, it does. And so there's your lifestyle. One of you is in the business, the other one's there to support the business. And that opened up a much larger market of actually smaller inns that were really nice inns that prior to the internet wouldn't have been able to satisfy two incomes. Okay. So that was one thing. The primary market back then were I call them the empty nester baby boomers. They're in their mid-50s. Kids are finally off of college. Now they say, okay, now we can go and buy our inn and go live this dream and get out of corporate America or whatever they wanted to do. What's happening now is that people are much smarter. They're much more focused on looking at this as a business. So they're coming in more educated, more focused as a business, and therefore when they come in, they're asking much greater questions and they have more resources like Aspiring Innkeeping and like innkeeping associations that educate through the process. So now what we're seeing is, in addition to the empty nester baby boomers, now we're seeing an influx, or I'm seeing an influx of younger couples, maybe in their late 30s to late 40s, with young kids. And they're in a position where all of a sudden they're saying, and they're dual income parents, both maybe in corporate America, whatever they're doing, and they're saying, honey, this is our shot. Our kids are at a certain age. We want them to grow up in a different environment where they can, whatever that environment might be. And this is our shot to make that move. And as they do it, they have more money to bring to the table for the down payment. So in addition to the cash flow of the business, the quality of the school systems now become really important, which is like their second question. And then thirdly, their lifestyle, this is where we want to raise our kids, et cetera, and go in that direction. So we're seeing that coming in younger, more educated as to the business, which is very encouraging. It's a strength for the industry to see that because the kids also grow up in that environment. My kids kind of grew up through the innkeeping environment too, and they helped with, cleaning the rooms and working our weddings and doing all those types of things prior to college. It's a great experience for my kids. So that's another market that we see coming in.
And you say that it appears that more people, more buyers anyway, or maybe even buyers and sellers, seem to be seeking the help of consultants like you. Is that right?
Well, yeah, because it starts to feed on each other, and it's like anything else. There's a success rate there, or there's a, gosh, we shoulda, coulda, woulda done whatever. Mm-hmm. Gee, I wish we'd have known this when we were there. And you see a lot of that. And as a result of that, and of course, if the consultants are doing a good job and they help somebody to buy an inn or to sell an inn, then those people are going to tell other people, hey, you're thinking about, and don't forget, every single innkeeper, probably once a week has a couple sitting there holding hands, at the breakfast table saying, oh, honey, as we quit our Monday to Friday rat race, let's open an inn. They turn to the innkeeper and say, tell us what it's like. And I used to get this all the time. And I used to say to them in their lovingly little look, I'd say, if you work really hard Monday through Friday, I said, that guarantees that you work weekends and holidays. And then all of a sudden they look at you and their expression goes from ideal dreamy to, oh my God, you're right, that's the only time we come, to what? Why do you do this job? All in 3 seconds. And basically I said, look, we have good days and bad days like everybody else. I said, but I can promise you. I said, one, I've never had a boring day. And two, I live where I want to live for 52 weeks out of the year. And I said, that's for me. That works for me. Might not work for everybody. I said, but that works for me. And I said, and so I'm very happy with that. And I said, this innkeeping business is not for everybody. And I said, and that's okay. So therefore, find that out before you invest everything. And I said, and everybody wins.
Excellent. All right.
Great.
Matt?
Good. Yeah, I think we're at the point now where we ask our usual closer, Tim. Is there anything else to add today or anything we may have missed?
Nope. I think I'm going to say that I'm encouraged with the innkeeping business. I think it's exciting, things such as Airbnb and all that have come in and everyone goes, oh my God, they're freaking out. Oh my God, what's this mean? And, I look at a whole new generation of the millennials who are coming in. And I said, Airbnb has done more for the innkeeping business in the last 5 years than the innkeeping business has done because they are training an entire generation of people to try unique and individual properties from the time they're 18-year-old guys, sitting on Tommy's couch or whatever. And the point of that is that as they mature, they are going to be more adept and more interested in trying these unique properties versus just the chain hotels. And I'm very encouraged by that. And I think that just bodes really well for the industry.
What a great closer. That's really neat stuff. Well, this is a wrap for our episode with Tim Piper, a renowned B&B industry expert and consultant who is with the Hearthside Group and is the host of the Aspiring Innkeeper seminar series. As you all heard, Tim was kind enough to share more about his background, the services he offers for B&B buyers and sellers, as well as his insights into the B&B sector overall. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast series, brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app. If you wish to learn more, please visit frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com.